Hey everyone, welcome back to The Crossroads. We're here, excited. This is episode 9 of this season 2, and so it's been a great conversation. We've been able to have great conversations over the last couple of episodes. Hope that you've enjoyed it. As always, if you're watching online on YouTube or if you're listening to us, I encourage you to go wherever you're watching and listening, subscribe, like it, comment, review it on Apple Podcasts, follow us, so you can always be up to date with what we're doing, and
share it with your friends,
and share it with someone. Yeah, you got it. So we're excited. If you're watching here, you've seen that we have a special guest, probably the most handsome guy in the room right now. I would say,
bar none.
Oh my God, yeah.
bar none.
So
So I'll talk a little bit. So this gentleman that we have here to my left, this is Glenn. Glenn is a member at the gym where I work, where I do physical therapy.
Okay. And
I met Glenn probably about 3 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, wandering the hallways of the gym, looking a little bit lost. And no, I'm kidding. But the first time I met this gentleman here, I'm not even sure how it came about. I don't know if we were talking about something, but he pulled up his shirt, like making a fist.
Okay.
And he had like a Star of David like tattoo on his arm, and he said something to the effect of I think we were talking about something Christian related, and he said, "You stole our best rabbi." And that stuck with me like 2.5 years now later. And so there's been a running joke between the two of us because Glenn likes to talk, which you'll find out here in a few minutes. But he always catches me at the most inopportune times. I'm going to the restroom. I'm going to get some water. I'm trying to go do something quick, and there's just never enough time. Mm-hmm. And it's been a running joke for a couple of years that, hey, one day we're going to sit down and have some pizza and actually just talk about stuff, anything really. And it hasn't happened. And then I got the idea. I was like, wait a second. We talk every couple Mondays. Yeah. He's available. Let's set it up, and he's here. So we're excited about having you, Mr. Glenn, here. Yeah. We're excited.
Well, thank you very much.
There's no pizza. There's no pizza, but we're here.
There's no pizza. Isn't it nice to lead with Judaism with all that's going on in the world? Well, could you come up with something better than Judaism?
But the thing is, you actually might have some insight that the three of us would never cross our mind. So I do want to get into that. But tell us about you a little bit.
Yeah. I want to know about who's Glenn.
I wish I knew. But I will tell you that 76 years of Judaism and living with a very large family and being the first in my family to go to college and having a father in sports, an older brother, eventually 2 sons, working for sports companies, getting scholarships to textile schools. So, if this was a live back and forth, nobody in my community wants to talk textiles. I'm the most boring human being in the world. But I will tell you that I can talk sports, and we'll eventually, tonight or down the road, we will certainly talk about finance. And I would think that what you would want to talk about mostly is what the hell is going on in the world. What is Netanyahu doing? And what is Iran taking advantage of? And how is it possible that Abraham had 2 sons that are now killing each other? So this is all, prophet stuff that wasn't meant to be, and how it's kept afloat is only God knows. Which is truly amazing.
So that's good, Glenn. Well, thank you for joining us and coming in. Like you said, you I think are perfect for what we're trying to do here, which was always Crossroads, the intersection of faith and life, right? So we're big sports junkies, whether whatever sport it is, like to talk about life and all that. And so appreciate you coming in, and hopefully everyone's had a good week. Usually we start off with that week there, but I'm curious, Glenn. You talked a little bit about Judaism, and it's obviously we as Christians, as Seventh-day Adventists, we have a lot of similarities. And obviously as a pastor, we like to dig into the context, especially of the Old Testament. As you said, our famous rabbi too, of Jesus too, and knowing that what he grew up into. So I'm curious to see what kind of your faith journey was like as a child going into where you are now, whatever you want to share there. But what was like that first time that you're like, maybe I want this to be my faith, or kind of your introduction to what you believe, if that makes sense?
Well, I mean, it started out what it was. My family coming from Hungary and the Ukraine. And when you get here in the 1930s and 40s, there's only one thing that you do as Jews and or any other immigrants is you look to fit in. Mm-hmm. So up until the age of 15, I celebrated Christmas. Had Christmas gifts every year. We knew we were Jewish, but more importantly, to set the table, rabbis will tell you that Judaism, basically, and they argue, is it a religion? Is it a race of people, or is it a creed of people? And it even goes further than that. So we are the Semitic group of people that came out of Africa and found our way into the Middle East. And from there, we ran into a few problems. But as I grew up, I am very faithful. And I believe in live and let live. But people, since I am in grade school, have basically called me something that I found out that is really not what Hebrews want to be called, which is a Jew. And that's all you hear on campuses today. Those freaking Jews. And this has been going on for 3,500 years. Those freaking Jews have done everything. They run governments. They hurt other people. They're all rich. I wish I was. They're all rich.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could go on. But as Omar said, very interesting. Yes. I guess he was our best rabbi. I can't really say that. But there was a great movie recently, a couple of years ago, and it had to do with a Muslim comic. And if you could come up with this, let people watch this movie. It was funny. With a father who was a comic sitcom guy, and he was dating his daughter, and she was in an accident in the hospital, and very quickly to say they wound up in the cafeteria, and the father sat with this guy dating his daughter, Muslim guy, and he didn't know what to say to him. So he sat, and he is sort of fumbling, and he went, so how do you feel about 9/11? Well, to tell you, I mean, who knows what was coming from that?
Right.
And the comic said 9/11. He goes, wow. He goes, we lost 18 of our best fighters. So I got to tell you, with that said, basically speaking, if you include the New Testament, that basically they took our best rabbi and have been killing us ever since.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
And the truth is that Christianity was born out of thousands of Jews following Jesus.
Right.
Literally.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that his last name, if that was his last name, Christ.
It wasn't Christ.
Well, whatever, became Christianity.
Right.
And I don't know if the Jew, and this is 400 years.
Right.
Right up till the New Testament, which was not so good for the Jews at that point, was written with the New Rome, which was out of Turkey. And what was that?
Constantinople.
Constantine's wife pretty much put together the New Testament. She took all the stories, and her husband, King, put all the stories together, and they selected what they believed to be and what should go in, which is nice. but not a lot of historical fact to any of that. As we know from the Old Testament, all they were was stories until archaeologists found out that many of these stories were true.
Yeah.
And the biggest one for the Hebrews was there was no Solomon. There was no building of new
Jerusalem? No.
Well,
temple?
of temples and my Temple University hat. And, with that said, there was no King David. And up until maybe this past full century, they found in Greece a tablet, because there were many people that went over from the Mediterranean to Greece, and they found out that there was actually a tablet that stated something about the house of David, exactly in that house of David, which was amazing. And I'm not sure if it's in the Old Testament. You would be able to tell me better, but it definitely said the Messiah would come from the lineage of the house of David to whoever it was. And Jesus was a relative of almost 1,000 years later.
One of the things that I've always kind of wondered, we talked about this a little bit before we started filming. Like I've never had the opportunity to sit down and talk to somebody of Jewish faith, or have that kind of, so for me, like, the question might come off as kind of like almost ignorant, but there is a lot of ignorance behind it because I've never had the opportunity. But when you do read the Old Testament, and the Old Testament talks about the coming Messiah, and Christians, obviously, we believe that Messiah was Jesus. What is it in terms of the Jewish faith tradition that why wasn't, for many Jews, Jesus the Messiah? Is there like one particular fundamental reason, or is it because in Christian circles, the idea that we have is that he wasn't accepted as the Messiah because the deliverance that he was providing wasn't what was expected at the time, which was freedom from the Romans and from oppression, and he was coming with a different message that wasn't a conquering Messiah and more of a sacrificial type Messiah. That's how I think a lot of Christians see or think in their minds why he wasn't accepted. Are we right on that, or are we totally off on that idea?
Well, you're 100% right, and blame it on the movie tradition, which goes back to all the old priests. And they did the same thing for thousands of years. The same words. Everything was word for word, taken literally. And when you take things literally, for the most part, you always get it wrong. And everybody reads the same paragraph, and everybody comes away with
the same,
a little bit of a different take.
Yeah.
And that really shouldn't be. And this is why Jews studied the Old Testament, the Torah, and to this day. And there is a school and a particular word for the way they parse it back and forth until they finally get the meaning of it. But the priests weren't going to do anything differently. And he came out and he talked to the people in ways that they never heard before. And they were not happy because that's not the way they kept their flock under control. Now, the negative part of religion is it was a way to control the masses.
Right.
It never should have been that way. And God basically never said, let there be temples, let there be synagogues, let there be churches, let there be religion.
Right.
All he said was, follow the commandments.
Right.
And maybe the only difference is that you believe in 10 commandments. Well, they believe that there were 614 commandments. That's a lot of things.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
And that's what they worked on daily. And he said, what are you wasting your time? And money changers are killing us. And stop going. You don't have to pray in a temple. You could pray in your bathroom. And what I found is that as long as you don't pray for yourself, things work out pretty well.
Right.
If you pray for people that have a need, as I have done, and why I put a Star of David on my arm, to the few guys that haven't seen my gym workout.
I love the flex too.
Pardon
The flex with it.
Listen,
Yeah.
Pardon me.
it's not coming out without flex.
Pardon me, it's not
flex.
coming out too much.
Yeah.
My son was in need, and he was going to college. And I felt like putting both of their names in there and letting them know that their father is praying for them.
That's good. That's beautiful.
And I let them know. I have never, even though I lost my parents when I was a teenager, 17 and 19.
Wow.
And thank God I had an older brother, never prayed for myself. And as we will talk probably about miracles, I had one in my life when I lived in Manhattan, and we'll get to it as you guys want to talk about miracles.
If you want to, you can share it. Go into it. Yeah,
please.
Well, I had a half priest, half artist live in an apartment building over me. Bernie came to our wedding. Nicest person I ever met in my life. I'm in an all Spanish building. Everybody speaks Spanish all the time. And I met this guy, and it's unbelievable. And he got into a world that he didn't understand, trying to sell his artwork, trying to make money, going to the church, singing, great musician. He did too much that wasn't in his, whatever you want to call it, wheelhouse. So, P.S. he goes away and he's selling his artwork on a trip, and he needs a lot of money. I bought some artwork for him, thank God, that I have in my house that we look at every day in our master bedroom and at our wedding, and just so close. And I'm walking back on the other side of Manhattan, and I am feeling so strange. I am feeling like something is so wrong, and I don't know what's wrong. And then I started thinking about him, and I was crying. And I walked back, and I think I felt something on my shoulder. And within a minute, I see one of his friends I knew, met at his party, coming up to me crying as I'm crying. I said, what's going on? She said, he just hung himself 5 minutes ago.
Wow. Man.
She just was running to the police or whatever she was doing, and he had just hung himself. And I am guessing that God let me know that something horrific happened in the realm of my world.
Wow.
And I don't know how to explain it. And but as a believer,
Right.
I believe that story.
Yeah.
And never had anything happen to me other than I have been very lucky to bounce back in everything. Sports, not being that smart a guy and getting a college degree that was paid for, and having wonderful parents to raise me, and a great brother to help take care of me, and 2 sons that call our house every week.
Beautiful.
Wow.
And what can you have better in this
Right.
world
Right.
than 2 sons calling, how you doing?
That's one of the things I think you start as a parent, you really appreciate. You know, like your kids, once they moved on and they're doing their thing,
Still
they
checking
haven't
in.
forgotten
Yeah.
about you. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
Like they're checking in. Like my wife and her mom, they both live here in Palm Coast, but they're on the phone like all the time, and it's cool. It's a unique
good
thing. It's
connection.
you can see that as a parent.
Yeah.
I have 2 little girls, but I hope that
That's
when they're
the-
grown, that they still call and check on me, and that would be a nice feeling. So that's good.
They will. I have few and far between have I met And maybe it's a God-given talent, but I have a very strong feeling for people. When not that I dislike them immediately, but
immediately. All right. It takes time.
Immediately I get a feel for people, and I know whether, and everybody does. I know whether or not, gee, I'd like to know more about that person. You get a feel for people, and it's not easy because everybody walks out of their house with baggage, and how people ever get to meet each other and become friends and fall in love, I do not know. I don't understand any of that. What could be? This is the most difficult time in history.
Right.
Well, and every interaction is so unique when you think about the fact, like, this is probably the only time that the six of us would be in this room together,
right?
And like, what brought us all together to talk about whatever it is we're going to talk about.
It's crazy.
And it's just so cool to see, those kinds of interactions, and it's, every person you meet, like you said, it's not always what it seems.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You see somebody, they might seem like they're always in a good mood or whatever, but you don't know.
You never know
the underlying
what's actually going on behind the
scenes. Everyone's got stuff they're dealing with. Everybody.
And like you're saying, right? I wonder what the world would look like if we were more intentional, regardless of our backgrounds, our context, religions, and faith. If we were more intentional to understand that and say, hey, the person I'm dialoguing with probably has a whole lot of things that they're dealing with just as much as me. But it's it's interesting is as you talk about it, you look at the world. There's so much going on. I'm curious to see, because it's interesting. It feels like even though we tend, and you mentioned it a little bit, when Jesus comes into the scene and he's kind of it's like, this is how we do things, and you're challenging the way we do things, right? And it seems like sometimes we use religion, and to your point too, OG, how you said we haven't really connected with people outside of our Christian faith. We use religion sometimes as boundaries, right? Or like insider outsider thing, where I'm in this side, I can't hang out with Jews, I can't hang out with the Muslims, the Buddhists and Hindus over there, and if you're an atheist, well, forget it, because you don't believe, it's like. And it's interesting how we use it rather than, and you look at a lot of the core tenets are a lot of times very similar, right? Maybe the verbiage is a little different. Maybe the way it's fully practiced is a little different. But at the core, there's a lot of similarities in terms of loving your neighbor, right? And putting others first. And yet we forget those and we look at more of the differences, and then we begin to, become hatred and anger and frustration. And then, so it's interesting how, I think at the core of a lot of our faiths that we have, they should lead us to being more, as you're saying, willing to listen to other people's perspectives and views and what they're going through. And in reality, sometimes it's just like, no, I'm sorry, you're not Christian. So, and we do that in the Christian church, in our denomination, right? And so even among Christians, it's like, oh, we're Seventh-day Adventists. We don't hang out with,
we're Baptists, we're this, we're that. And there's just so many of them. And it's interesting, kind of what popped into my head when you were saying that is like, when you meet, I think it takes an intentionality to realize that even people that don't think like you are awesome people.
You got to step out of it. There's
atheists that love people more than Christians love people.
That's true.
Right.
And I think people sometimes they don't think about it that way. You know what I mean? They think about it, well, like it's us and them, right? And I think you have to. It takes kind of like being willing to dialogue, right, and meet people and see that. Even people that have other ideas in their mind of how they feel about certain things, at the end of the day, we're all people. We all want to be loved. We all want to be accepted. We all want to dialogue, to interact, right? And it's interesting to see, but you have to like actually go outside of your house to do that kind of stuff and be intentional about
friends.
it, and be open to disagreeing about stuff too. Like it's okay, right? We don't have to agree, right?
Yeah. I think that's good. Glenn, you mentioned something, you wanted to talk a little bit about it before we started recording too. So I'm curious, right? You mentioned you were in finances and textile, and that nobody wants to hear about that, but we want to hear a little.
Certainly not.
But I'm curious to see what, this is a question that comes up in our conversations, and especially with the guests. How did your faith and how did it and how does it interact with what you do, right? In terms of finance, maybe you can explain a little bit of what you did, and maybe how your faith interacted with.
Well, after losing my parents, specifically my father, and then my mother a few years later, it was just pure luck. All I knew was sports. My father owned a professional football team that was back in the day, in the 1930s and 40s. These were corporations. And people don't know, like the Chicago Bears were the Staley Bears. And Staley was a chemical company. I happened to have a friend that worked for them.
The Acme Packers, right? Am I right?
Oh, you're right. I feel like I've seen. Yeah.
So when you go way back, my father worked for Sheffield Farms that became Holland Farms. And he played baseball for them. He set up his own football team. And my wife, lucky for me that her mother knew my aunt in second grade. Her uncles knew my father and my mother's sisters and said that, we used to watch, that was our football team on Long Island into the Rockaways, which was just another island into Queens, into Long Island. So I didn't know I was the worst dressed human being that ever walked the earth, and basically still am, and wound up at FIT in Manhattan, and 18 years old, lived 12 miles from Manhattan, was never in Manhattan, nor were any of my friends living on Long Island. We just played sports. We played in places that ex-professional guys showed up. We had, for example, as my brother told me recently, I slapped a guy playing basketball named Larry Brown.
Oh, wow.
Who was
the Larry Brown.
He said named Larry Brown.
The greatest ABA basketball player in history, the greatest shooter in the ABA before they merged with the NBA. And at the schoolyard, we had all these old pros playing. One guy created the point shaving scandals of the 50s. And I grew up playing basketball, 3-on-3 basketball with professionals. Is the way you learn basketball.
That's how you get good.
Wow.
That's how you get very good. And anyhow, so I'm playing with this guy on my team, and it's a little unusual that a teammate is constantly screaming at you. And he's still that way. He's on the sidelines with a big deal college team, and he does what I've always done and wanted to do, coaching, which is when a kid sits down, you sit next to him and you tell him what's going on.
Right.
Should have done this. Anyhow, he's doing it on the fly.
So wait, Larry Brown left the NBA coaching.
No, this is different. Oh, no, is that Larry Brown?
No, same guy.
Same guy.
He was coaching the Sixers.
Sixers,
Yeah.
Pistons,
Allen Iverson, all that stuff.
That Larry
Knicks.
Brown.
But then he left.
Yeah.
He's doing college now.
He started in college.
He's now an assistant.
Went to NBA and now he's back in college.
He's back in college. Okay, because I lost him after he left the
I
Sixers.
thought he was the NBA or broadcasting.
Considered one of the greatest coaches and the greatest point guard coach of all time, Allen Iverson.
Yeah.
The greatest point guard in history. And he did what Larry Brown wanted, which no one in the NBA does, is a pull-up jump shot. You drive a guy in, you pull up, you go as high in the air, you stop, they roll past you, and you hit the easiest shot in the world. They don't do that. All you see is people doing these floating flies, going nowhere, shooting 30%. Anyhow, so he wouldn't stop screaming. I said, listen, Larry, please. I'm not that nice a guy. I'm 17 years old. I'm 5'9", 230 pounds of solid steel with about
5'9",
with about 30 pounds of fat as a
just
protection.
A buffer. It's a buffer.
And I don't know that I can handle an older guy at 170 pounds keep screaming. He throws a basketball at me. He's embarrassing me in front of his friends. And being a redhead, he should have known that I slapped him and shut him up.
Wow.
So at that time,
Larry, I hope you're listening. Give me a call. I'll give you my phone number.
He's been looking for that guy who smacked him
for the last 60 years. I've been looking for that guy.
I apologize.
So how was he in the pros already? Was he playing for the ABA?
He was a senior at North Carolina, ready to be drafted. When I was a senior in high school. So there's
Wow.
So he's got to
That's
be
an awesome story.
That's
he's
amazing.
got to be 81 years old today,
Right.
and still understands the game.
If
Right.
I ever
And
meet
all
Larry
of that.
Brown, I'm going to ask him, did somebody smack you back in the day
What
that was
park?
about
What park?
4
Was it
years
a
your
park?
junior?
So funny
gym?
enough,
This is in Manhattan?
if you guys are enjoying humor on Long Island,
Long Island.
that I said to my brother, couldn't you have told me that story 30 years ago? It happened like
Right.
45, 50 years ago. I could have been telling that story
All
for
around, yeah.
Every
That's
time
it.
he sees
That's
Larry
it.
Brown on TV, he's
and
like, I
now-
smacked
Smack
that
that
guy.
guy.
and now you tell me this. But I've got, I need to be cued in, but
That's
I've
pretty good,
played
though.
sports almost every day of my life.
Wow.
I'm 76 years old, and I play tennis with 70 to 81-year-olds, and they're all insane. They are insane. If you want to know anything about senior tennis, oh my God. And I only learned tennis 3 years ago, but because I played 5 sports in college,
Right.
Oh, wow.
I have an
Wow.
eye-hand coordination, and I coached every sport,
Wow.
including soccer,
Okay.
which I thought I was the greatest soccer coach of all time. I didn't know the names of any positions.
Right. Like Ted Lasso.
I was an assistant to the best coaches in grade school, junior high, and high school, AAU,
right.
and I didn't have to learn anything. I know spacing. And there is no difference in passing in soccer
Right.
than there is in 3-on-3 basketball. It's a triangle.
Oh, that's very good.
The
That's a very good
triangle
point.
offense that
Yeah.
Phil
Phil
Jackson
Jackson,
stole
Lakers.
from another guy.
Yeah.
That you
This is
smacked.
all
Another
has,
guy that he smacked.
this all has the lineage of Jesus Christ in
The
it.
Trinity, huh?
The
There
Trinity
Wow, there it is.
you go.
of all life all comes
Full circle.
together.
Or full triangle.
And
Full
I have
full triangle.
parents screaming at why are you yelling at my son? So I'm not yelling at your son. I'm yelling to him. He's 50 yards away.
Right. How's he going to hear me if I talk normal?
By the time he comes in here and 8 minutes later I tell him what he did wrong, he has no idea
He forgot. Yeah.
what's going on.
Right.
And the kids come running in and they go, Coach Glenn, where do I go? I said, I don't know the names of the positions. I'm not going to tell them that. So I said, well, where do you normally play? Oh, you play a front striker, whatever, first line guy.
Yeah.
Is that where you play? He goes, yeah. I said, so go play there.
Okay, coach.
Got it.
Coach.
Thanks, coach.
Well, do we play a 4-4-3 or a
Right.
4-3-4?
Right,
I said,
right.
well, what were you playing before you came out? Oh, we were in the 4-4. Go
Do
into
that.
the
Keep it up. Keep it
4-4-3.
up.
I'm impressed. And I was very lucky to have a son that scored 3-4 goals a game.
Right.
And every time we would win, people come, wow,
your
Coach, you really
changed
really
the
know
game."
your stuff.
Your son is carrying you. He carried you through that.
My son carried me through
It's like, do what you do.
baseball, basketball, and soccer.
Nice. Nice.
Wow.
And I did for
love
him innately did it because this is what you feel that you do. My father threw me 1,000 pitches a week.
Wow.
I did it for my son. Same in boxing. I taught him. My father was a sparring partner at Jack Dempsey, who was considered the greatest. He was like in his early 20s. My father's father died when he was 17. He owned the drugstore. He was delivering. He got ran over when he was on his bike.
Jeez.
And that's how my father went out. It was almost like, and he lived a great life with my mother. And it was almost like, you know what? I'm going to give you a great life, and then you're going to come up here and help other people. And this was our story. Most of my aunts and uncles all died in 40s and 50s, and I don't know why. And I only remember one story. This is why when you're with your parents, grandparents, consider yourself pretty lucky. Because as I'm standing over my father's casket, people came over to me. He died at 55, going on 56, and said to me, wow, what a great long life he had. And at 17, it seemed that way.
Right.
Today, if you die at 55, it's a major catastrophe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you're part of Hamas and you're a Hamas fighter and you die at 55, they go, oh, gee, What a great fighter. He could have had another 20 years fighting those freaking Hebrews.
So you're a financial guy, and I know like the three of us were talking about it, and I'm sure the listeners. What is one or two pieces of advice you would give to somebody, in their 30s and 40s like us, to take it to the next level?
I really need a question to be asked, but I will tell you, the only way to learn is I have been watching the 3 financial channels 7 days a week. On weekends, they tape and they bring in, and everyone brings in experts on you name it. One guy's an expert on credit spreads, fixed income, large cap, the Dow, the Russell 2000, the tech stocks. And when they bring these people in and other financial guys are asking them questions, well, these are the guys you watch. So 7 days a week, 8-9 hours a day, plus I tape every major guy. I have learned probably the most important thing that I could tell you is that the stock market is like going into casino. You cannot, and I learned that lesson very young when I first was earning good money, and somebody invented something and they sat me down and they said, well, these are mutual funds. You buy 30, 40 stocks, a basket. And I said, but I'm making money on 1 or 2 stocks that my guy's telling me about. Don't invest in stocks. Invest in a basket of stocks. Invest in ETFs. Warren Buffett, when he was on, and I've seen him go to MBA students. The problem is, and in fact, I'm putting something together now for Daytona State College, that juniors and seniors are coming out and know nothing about their personal finance. As they start to make money, they're just like professional athletes. In their first year or two, they lose every dime. They get into trouble, and/or they stay the course. They make more money, and they finally figure it out. So there are ETFs. Anyhow, so Warren Buffett makes a bet with a stock market guy. He buys 5 of the greatest stocks you could ever buy. And Warren Buffett puts the 10 grand in. And after 1 year, he made more money by buying into these Fidelity or Magellan ETFs that have 100 stocks in them, 50 stocks in them. Today, you could buy only tech stocks, or you can buy, bonds, but you got to have a mix. And if you don't deal with a financial manager who works for a large financial company, and if you don't pay them, that I do with Wells Fargo, 1.25% to direct your money, where they meet weekly and monthly to discuss what goes into that risk management that you have told them, I can't handle too much risk, then fine, we'll put you in, as you're older, 70, 80% bonds, 20% stocks. As you're younger and you have a major timeline, you can almost not make any mistakes.
Because there's time to recover it.
But there's time to recover. But why not make on average 8, 9, 10% instead of 5, 4%, 7%? And when people lose a lot of money, they don't stay the course anymore, no matter what their age is. So these are the lessons I've learned. And there is something called wealth management. When you sit with a financial guy, he asks you, how much do you owe? What's your mortgage? What's your mortgage rate? How much money do you owe? How much money do you make? Did you marry a woman that has a job? Thankfully. And I got down on one knee when she said that when we have kids, that she wants to go back to work. I said, that's all I wanted to hear, honey. But you're not going to stay home and eat bonbons. So basically speaking, wealth management has a myriad of things that you could do on a daily basis besides know about taxes. so that you can align your money properly. But when we go to Walmart, I called my son. I said, we go to Walmart and we buy all these basic ketchups and all kinds of ingredients and mustards and pasta. I probably save $25, $30 every time over and above. I won't name their name. Starts with a big P.
Ends the next.
And where we live down here and other large department stores. And I cook and I shop for meals. And as you're walking down and you see things, and especially if you're hungry, you want to buy them. Every time you say, gee, that doesn't go with the meal that I'm putting together, of which I'm buying at a price,
Right.
You're wasting money. And finding the right mortgage rate and buying a car within your means, whether it be a used car, everything that you could save a penny earned today.
Right. It's not just one thing. It's an accumulation
of multiple things.
Becomes a dime, becomes, as a guy that bought my house in New Jersey said to me, how do we save money? I said, you pay yourself first. You take 10, 15% of your salary, you put it into a CD, a guaranteed bank account that is untouchable, and you work that through the years and let that be the base. There is no such thing as getting rich quick. There's no great ideas, otherwise everybody would be doing it. And if you guys would call in and ask financial questions, I'm not giving you anything of my own opinion. Everything is, for example, I'm buying bonds now. The guy that told me to buy bonds, his name, he heads BlackRock, Rick Reeder, and he's on Bloomberg all the time. And he only manages $2.8 trillion.
That's it, huh?
Him with 50 guys, with 50 guys that only study fixed income daily. And there's many different kinds of bonds. And what he told me to do, and I do it because I'm older. But that doesn't mean when you're younger you shouldn't be buying bonds. Especially when the Fed just told you that they're going to drop interest rates 7 or 8 times, and every rate drop, the value of your bond goes up, which is in a reverse. As interest rates go up, the bond value goes down, and vice versa. It's a real simple thing that they do.
People write in on the comments questions for Glenn, because we're going to need another episode with Glenn.
Yeah.
There's just more to talk about.
I wish you would call me back. I have about 50,000 sports stories.
This is just the tip of the iceberg.
I have
we need more
stories,
Larry Brown stories.
Yeah.
And I can only tell you finance stuff, and it only comes back to me when I can remember that it was, what's her name from Goldman Sachs, who said, last week she ran Goldman Sachs, and she had 20 people listening to her, and they said, well, what should we buy? She said, well, guess what? America is aging almost as fast as Japan. Try healthcare. And if you've been in healthcare the last 3, 4, 5, with all the crazy ups and downs.
Healthcare's where it's at, though.
And the future,
there's always a need.
with all the great new technologies, and technologies costing more money, and that more money that you spend saves you more in life longevity and making more money and living older and all of that.
Yeah.
That's good. I appreciate that. That's good.
No, this is not the last time.
It's a start.
It's a start. It's a start.
Post in the comments for this episode questions for Glenn.
Questions for Glenn.
And then we'll
and if you go to
www.askglenn.
if you go, no,
we can have askglenn.com.
if you go to Daytona College,
there you
tell
go.
the business manager that someone's going to be coming to him soon for September, a night course. I will teach it for free. And I will, and I've done this in high schools where people have asked me questions, the same ones that Jay Leno asked,
I'd go to that class.
college students. is Canada the country that's north of us, or is it Mexico? And they get it right 50% of the time.
Right, right.
They're brilliant kids, but they're clueless in Seattle. Great movie, by the way.
Yeah.
Sleep. So, Glenn, I'm wondering if you have one, from your faith, if there's like a tenet or a principle that you live by that you feel the world would benefit from if they practiced it as well.
Well, I'd like to say, love thy neighbor. There's a lot of neighbors I don't like. I'd like to say treat people like you would like to be treated, but they don't because life is too complicated. I would say just make friends, never fight with your family, and believe that, because if you don't believe that there is more to all of this, and there isn't another better place, that it could be very depressing down here, and you will lose a lot of yourself, and you will not and never become your best self. And the only way to become your very best self, I am close to that because I have done so much, but I've had 76 years to work on it.
Right.
And I am better now than I was 10 years ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's great.
I like that.
Thank
Do you have? Can you give us maybe one more sports story? Or
Well, you got to, as I am hoping they'll call in with a finance story,
yeah.
all you got to do is ask me about a team, a player,
All right. Yeah, let's go. Give
a
us
sports
junkie.
position thing. I don't care what
you
it
got,
is.
Carol? What you
I will
got?
come up with an answer.
It might not even be true.
It might not be true.
It'll
might
sound,
not be-
it'll sound
good.
real.
It might not be meaningful,
But it's
right.
it's gonna be there.
but
So-
there's very little I do not
Give us
know
a story.
about
Give us-
sports.
So you mentioned that you played a few sports. You mentioned that your father owned a football team.
Yeah, minor league, basically,
Minor league.
Okay.
compared to the pros. Yeah.
What is your favorite football story?
Well, I'll give you two.
Sounds
We'll
good.
take it.
There you go.
Two for price
For
of
the
one.
price of one.
I played alongside the angriest human being that ever walked the earth. His name was Lyle Alzado. I played with him in junior high. I played with him in high school and 2 years as semi-pro. Lyle, he actually has a rule named after him, which is the Alzado rule. And he went to the Super Bowl with the Raiders in 81, maybe, with
Crazy.
the heavy-set redheaded coach.
Madden.
I see him, John Madden.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things I can't remember unless I'm prompted. And boy, Lyle was half Jewish. He hated being Jewish because everybody picked on Jews on Long Island in the 60s. My God, was he anyhow? So the rule was that the Alzado rule was that you're not allowed to take your helmet off. He was a defensive lineman. You can't take the guard's helmet off and beat him over the head with his own helmet.
That was his rule.
He did that twice. So it's now the Alzado rule.
Miles Garrett did
It's
that
illegal.
like last year.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Lyle said, I don't really understand. It's like Draymond Green.
Right.
I don't really
Draymond.
understand.
What did I do wrong?
What did I do?
I wasn't trying
Why
to
is
hit
that
him.
guy laying on the ground making believe
Suspended
I
indefinitely.
making believe I hit him?
He needs help though. That's the
No
whole
doubt.
thing. I mean,
I
that's,
thought the greatest story for older people is that I'm in a gym and I'm working out and a kid is there and he's, my grandfather died during the playoff before Super Bowl, before the championship game, the Giants against the Eagles. It's always the Giants against the Eagles. And they had a guy, a defensive tackle, that knocked out our famous running back. What was her name, Debbie? Where they were on TV. She was a famous announcer, Kathy Lee Gifford.
Oh, Frank Gifford.
Frank Gifford was the handsomest to be from the Giants, the greatest running back they ever had, Hall of Fame, which he died recently. Kathy Lee becoming famous on TV. And this defensive lineman for the Eagles blindsided him, knocked him out cold, and everybody in the stands, 50,000 people, thought he was dead.
Wow.
People were fainting, and the kid tells me, he goes, yeah, and my grandfather was at that game, and he died of a heart attack.
Because of that?
I said, well, you don't know this, you idiot, but one guy died on the front row. He goes, yeah, my grandfather had 50-yard line front row tickets. I said, he was the guy that died at that game. Wow. He thought your grandfather thought that Frank Gifford was dead and had a heart attack.
Oh, my goodness.
And your parents never told you this. No, they only told me he passed away.
He was in the...
Wow.
He got excited at the game. Yeah, he got excited.
Wow.
His idol was dead.
Wow.
And women were fainting because, let me tell you, you look
Just the scene,
at Frank Gifford, one of the handsomest human beings that ever walked the earth. Wow. And wound up with Frank Cosell, with
Howard Cosell,
Monday
Night Football.
And started Monday Night Football. Mm-hmm. He was the handsome guy. Cosell was the annoying guy.
Imagine dying and the guy ends up living and you die.
You die.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And Meredith from the Hated Cowboys was the third. Pizza Pie is a group threesome that worked very well.
Wow. What a story.
But I got
your grandfather made the news and died,
stories,
the kid's grandfather. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was terrible. Terrible.
Terrible. Well, we go into our questions here. We pick it out from the box, so
Yep, it's time for
it's a good one.
Our talking points. What do you think are the consequences of Christians not practicing what they preach?
Oh,
that's a good one.
That is a good one.
Who wants to take a stab at it? I guess we can open that too.
I'll go last because I got to hear what you guys talk.
We'll go with Christians. Yeah.
All right. So
you want to go?
Go first.
We'll go around this way.
All right.
Can you repeat it one more time?
As I drop it.
What are the consequences?
What are the consequences of Christians not practicing what they preach? So I think obviously this goes for this is broad, but if you don't practice what you preach, no one is going to believe anything you say, whether what you're saying is true or not.
Right.
And so if you are espousing certain things, if you're saying, this is what you should be doing, this is how you should do it, but then I watch you and you're doing the complete opposite, I don't believe that what you're saying holds any value, that it has any weight. And you can turn people off from really good information, and you can turn them off from something that can change their life because of your hypocritical behavior, your hypocritical lifestyle. So I think there are a lot of negative consequences. And again, I'm it says Christians here, but you can apply that to anything that can apply for anything. Really.
That's good. OG?
Yeah, I would agree with what you said. I'd say there's almost nothing more damaging to whatever it is that you say you believe in, whatever your cause is, whatever you're living for. There's nothing more damaging than living a life that's not in alliance with that, right? And you instantly discredit yourself, right? And whatever it is that you're saying you believe in. If you're saying you're a Christian and you're not acting like how as a Christian, there's nothing more damaging to Christianity, to everyone that sees that, than your behavior as not behaving like you're saying you are, right? So if you wanna to turn off people from whatever it is that you believe in to what that is, then don't behave like what you're saying you are. Being a hypocrite is the worst kind, because I'd rather you not say you don't believe in something than to say you do, but then live your life in a way that's not in accordance with that. It's just very damaging. I think the consequences are huge. I mean, really, because sometimes people look to you.
Right.
If you say you're something, people look to you, and if that's not your life, then what are you saying about what's behind it? If I'm a Christian and I'm behaving in a certain way, what am I saying about the Christ behind me?
Right.
The God behind me that I'm believing in, right? What am I saying about that when I'm not living in accordance to that? So I think it's extremely damaging. I mean, you might as well not even be a Christian or whatever it is.
That's good.
If you're going to be a fake one.
Yeah. That's good.
So
Glenn, you want me to go?
Glenn's gonna go last.
I think it's Proverbs that says that out of the mouth the heart speaks, or right? Yeah, out of the mouth the heart speaks. So I think it's interesting, right? You know, we always talk about it, walk the talk, right? You actually prove what you're doing. So a lot of times we say one thing, and this happened a lot with in the Old Testament. We see that, right? You're saying one thing, and God says, what I want is your heart, right? Where what are you truly doing? And so I think of the first words that came up are words that we see a lot now, especially in the political realm and in TV, right? Whenever we have anything going on, we have the words of misinformation and disinformation, right? And I think when Christians aren't truly being who they claim they represent, or what they claim they believe in, not only are they misinforming the world of who, like you said, who you represent, but you're doing a disservice and creating, what it says, intentionally misstating the facts, or deliberately intending to mislead. So you're misleading, right? So you're misinforming others of what's happening, but you're also misleading others of what that is, because they look, like you said, right? You look at you and like, well, I think the Bible teaches this in the New Testament, and Jesus lived this way, but that's very different from what you're living out, right? So I think it can be very dangerous when Christians aren't acting or living out the ways that we believe Jesus teaches, right? And so obviously that's a tricky conversation there, because applying his principles in our day can look differently for people.
Sure.
But it can be very deadly and very bad, very very hard. Yeah. Glenn, what do you think?
I think too much. I think about this all the time.
No, that's what we wanted. I want to know what you think.
Well, I'll again, because I'm the token Hebrew, and by the way, I don't mind being called Jewish or a Hebrew.
I was gonna ask what do you prefer?
But it is very negative to a Jewish person to be called a Jew.
A Jew, okay.
Because today that is what is screamed out, and the problem with people is that they don't preach enough about themselves. They do not call out the extremists, whatever you want to call it, the far left, the far right in America, the extremists of their religions, of their countries. I think that a lot of it has to do with being maybe illiterate and growing up in societies that don't have that freedom for people to hear what's going on. Imagine with watching 2 TV channels in Russia or 1 in China, that all you hear is these doctrines. But I got to tell you, it's terrible that you're not getting. I mean, Muslim people are just wonderful people. But how do you get to know them? They won't talk to Jewish people. And the truth is, and I'll get into trouble as we end all this, that God had, and you could be a Jews for Jesus, or you could be a Jew like myself who's not a Jews for Jesus, but is not exactly a Orthodox Jew, to tell you that there's no doubt in my mind that Jesus Christ, if Christ is the right word, was the Messiah, without a doubt. And that he, in many ways, is a son of God. I don't know if he's the son of God, because Moses was spoken to like a son. Muhammad was spoken to like a son. Abraham created the religions by willing to give up his son. And we were not the first ones to be offered all of this from God. I cannot tell you what group 5,000 years ago was offered, but we accepted one God because Abraham accepted it, and look how it worked out for him. He actually had people either hear or see what went on the mount which is the same mount they're fighting over today. So I got to believe that there are a number of people that God spoke to that brought them up as the Son of God, and I cannot argue what happened 2,000 years ago. Did 8 people actually see Jesus come out of the cave? And is he the only Son of God? And does it really matter? If you're a Christian, believe in Jesus. But to believe and not be outspoken like these people on our college campuses that are raising our kids, with all this wokeness is going on, you saw what these people that run the colleges have pretty much said. There's only one story. Those poor Palestinians are being treated like the worst dirt in the world. And those Jews that get everything, and those other people that have it easy compared to them. The Christians never back the Muslims. The Jews don't agree and back.
The narratives are always, it's everybody has their own narrative to kind of push, right?
So, to bring to a point that whoever's up in heaven, that your race of people, your creed, have believed in, and things have been written that have turned out to be true. I mean, the truisms of David coming to light, and that dinosaurs were not roaming the earth 4,900 years ago, and that, there are Jews that believe that dinosaurs walked the earth 5,000 years ago, not millions of years ago, because that's when God created. But, that's being literal. Each day could have been 100, 500 million years. We don't know that timeline. So to get to the final point is that you just need to believe, and that each religion has a lot to offer, and what they're doing on these campuses by only taking one side and doing to your college, to your kids, what China and Russia is doing to their populations. And if you stand up at a board meeting and all of a sudden the FBI is calling you at home, this needs to be turned around.
Yeah.
Who's to say what they should be doing with our children other than, and I grew up in an era where we ran our children and they worked out pretty well. So I leave you with some of those thoughts. Call in. There's millions of words behind all that.
One of the things that he said that kind of I had never thought about is you follow the story of Abraham and accepting the call, but like how many Abrahams before Abraham that maybe didn't accept the call?
Probably, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like who's to say Abraham was the first and the only that was ever called? Like the Bible is the story of Abraham, but I mean there's so many other stories that could have been that happened probably that just aren't in the Bible per se. And the second takeaway, tell me if this kind of fits with what you were saying, is whatever it is that you believe in, like walk that out. You know what I mean? Like kind of coming back to the question about being a hypocrite. Like whatever it is, whether it's a Jewish faith or Christian faith, Muslim faith, whatever it is, like live it true and walk it out. Yeah. And really, there's no room for any kind of hatred or anything in any of these kinds of faith, in any of these faiths. You know what I mean? And
it's something that stood out to me too that you just said was calling out hypocrisy.
Yeah, where you see it.
You see it. And I think, again, whatever you believe, I think that's kind of your responsibility to say, hold on, that is not true to our belief system. And something that you had mentioned is, when people see something, you're professing one thing but you're doing another, they're going to say, oh well, I guess this is acceptable.
Yeah,
it's up to whatever faith system you belong to, believe in. It's up to you to call out wrong. Yeah. And say, hey, within your own beliefs, and say that is not
who we are.
That's not a correct picture of what we believe in and how we.
That's good. That doesn't happen very often either when you think about it.
It doesn't.
That doesn't happen very often,
but it should.
Yeah. We usually double down.
Yeah.
When we say That's good. I think it's important, right? As you mentioned, I think everyone that we encounter has their not just baggage, but their own narratives and perspectives and biases, right? And so, how do we come together as different, people to be able to at least have a conversation? Like, this is where it starts, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we believe. Having these conversations, agreeing to disagree, and then trying to figure out how can we move forward together with that. And obviously knowing that this is a crazy, broken world, so there's so much things going out there. But Glenn, we appreciate you coming. Hopefully we can have you again.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But appreciate you
I would
coming
love
out.
to. I just wish I could be more informative, and the only way to do that is
this is not the last time we're having
No, I
here.
appreciate it. You guys ask the questions, and with these three students and knowledgeable guys, and me as a character that I have lived everywhere and anywhere, rural, in Manhattan, in the 70s. I have lived through race riots in Philadelphia going to school in the late 60s. We have to know what is your biggest concerns, and that's the only way these guys can answer and be of help. Us going on like this, you're only going to learn about my life, and to tell you the truth, my wife will tell you, I am so boring.
No,
it's incredible.
Far from it.
Great
story.
Listen,
I can spend another couple hours here just talking about stuff.
Yeah,
we got to do this again.
Do it again.
Thank you for coming.
But thank you.
Well, hopefully I will be at where you work. I don't know if you want to mention the name of it, and I will be there a lot of years, and I will come every month, every other month, hopefully for the next 36 years.
Hey,
you got another 40 years after that.
Well, my son said I won't be I won't be a grandchild until I won't have a grandchild until I'm 106.
There you go.
So I have to live to 106.
All right.
Oh man,
I'm more than happy to do it.
That's Well, thank you again, Glenn. Thank you, guys. And again, like Glenn mentioned, if you have any questions, we encourage you, write them on the comments, DM us, and we love to bring those up. And next time we have Glenn, we'll be able to ask those. So thank you again. Follow us wherever you are, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.